Rachel stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her cheek burning where Emily's hand had landed. The sound of that slap echoed in her head louder than the silence that followed. Guests stared, unsure of what to do. Her husband, Daniel, looked like he was ready to explode, but Rachel just stood there numb. She never imagined her sister, the person she grew up sharing secrets, clothes, and late-night talks with, would ever do something like that. It all happened so fast. One moment, they were arguing about something small. Emily had made a snide comment about Daniel, hinting that Rachel didn't deserve him. Rachel tried to walk away, but Emily followed, her voice rising until everyone in the room turned to look. Then came the slap, hard, humiliating, and full of years of hidden jealousy. Rachel's heart sank. She could feel every eye in the room on her, and for the first time, she didn't even try to defend herself. Daniel stepped forward, ready to say something, but Rachel shook her head slightly. She didn't want to cause a bigger scene. Her throat was tight, her hands trembling. Without a word, Daniel took her hand and led her out of the house. The car ride home was quiet. Rachel stared out the window, watching the lights blur past. She wanted to cry but couldn't. It wasn't just the pain of the slap. It was the realization that her own sister had done it. When they got home, Daniel turned to her, his voice calm but firm. "You didn't deserve that. No one treats my wife that way." Rachel felt tears finally spill down her face. She tried to understand what had gone wrong. Emily had always been competitive, but she thought it was just harmless sibling rivalry. They had grown up close, helping each other through hard times. Rachel had even been the one to help Emily get her job and apartment. So why this? Why now? As Rachel sat on the couch, Daniel brought her a glass of water and gently touched her cheek. "You're shaking," he whispered. She tried to smile but couldn't. The slap wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It broke something inside her. She felt betrayed in a way that words couldn't describe. The person she trusted most had chosen to humiliate her in front of the man she loved. That night, Rachel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. She kept hearing Emily's voice, her laughter after the slap, the shock on everyone's faces. Daniel reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "But I promise you, she's going to regret what she did." Rachel didn't know what he meant at the time, but his tone was serious. Deep down, she knew Daniel wasn't the kind of man to let disrespect slide. She also knew that something had changed forever. That night marked the end of sisterly love Rachel had always been different from Emily. She was calm, soft-spoken, and never liked arguments. Emily, on the other hand, was bold and outspoken. Growing up, she always had to win, whether it was a small game or a family debate. Rachel didn't mind. She let her sister have the spotlight. But as they got older, those differences started to create distance. Emily began to see Rachel's kindness as weakness, and Rachel started to realize that Emily's love often came with competition. When Rachel met Daniel, everything between the sisters slowly changed. Daniel was polite, hardworking, and the kind of man who carried himself with quiet confidence. He worked as an architect and had built a name for himself in the city. From the beginning, Emily seemed interested in him, always asking questions, complimenting him a little too much, and acting overly friendly. Rachel brushed it off at first, thinking Emily was just being nice. But Daniel noticed it. He told Rachel one evening, "Your sister's a little intense." Rachel laughed it away, not wanting to believe her sister could ever cross a line. After Rachel and Daniel got married, the tension only grew. Emily began comparing their lives, her apartment, her job, her relationship, to Rachel's. She would make little comments like, "Must be nice having a husband who can afford everything," or, "I wish I had time to relax like you do." Rachel tried to ignore the remarks, pretending not to hear the bitterness in her sister's voice. But deep inside, she could feel the jealousy building. Family dinners became uncomfortable. Emily would show up late, dressed to impress, always with some story meant to outshine Rachel. Their parents tried to keep the peace, but even they could feel the cold air between their daughters. Whenever Rachel spoke, Emily would interrupt or roll her eyes. And every time Daniel complimented Rachel, Emily's expression would tighten. Rachel noticed, but she kept quiet, hoping it would pass. Daniel, however, didn't hide his dislike for the tension. After one dinner, he said, "I don't understand why she treats you that way. You've done nothing but be good to her." Rachel sighed. "She's just going through things. I don't want to make it worse." She still believed that patience could fix it, that being kind would calm Emily's resentment. But kindness didn't work this time. The more Rachel stayed quiet, the bolder Emily became. Little insults turned into open disrespect. She would mock Rachel in front of others, laugh at her opinions, and act like Daniel was more interested in talking to her. Rachel pretended not to notice, but every word stung. Behind Emily's fake smiles, Rachel could see the truth. Her sister couldn't stand seeing her happy. What hurt the most was that Rachel had never competed with her. She had only wanted love and peace between them. But jealousy is quiet poison. It spreads slowly until it finally explodes. And Rachel didn't know it yet, but that explosion was already on its way. Beginning of a quiet storm neither of them saw coming. The evening of their parents' anniversary started beautifully. The house was filled with music, laughter, and the smell of food. Rachel had helped organize everything, making sure her parents' favorite songs played and their friends felt comfortable. Daniel stayed by her side, greeting everyone warmly. For a while, everything felt peaceful. Even Emily seemed in good spirits, smiling and joking with the guests. Rachel thought maybe things were finally improving between them. As the night went on, people began to drink more, and the jokes got louder. Rachel was sitting with her parents when she noticed Emily across the room, talking to a few cousins and pointing in her direction. Rachel tried to ignore it, but soon Emily's voice rose above the music. "You know," she said loudly, "Rachel always lands on her feet. Guess it's easy when your husband's loaded." The laughter that followed wasn't friendly, it was awkward and forced. Rachel froze for a moment, her smile fading. Daniel looked at Emily sharply, but Rachel placed a hand on his arm, trying to calm him. She didn't want to make a scene. "Emily," she said quietly, "that's enough." But Emily wasn't done. She stepped closer, still smirking. "Come on, Rachel. Everyone knows you didn't marry for love. You just knew how to pick a man who could take care of you." A few people gasped. The room began to quiet down. Rachel felt her face grow hot. She wanted to leave, but her parents were watching, embarrassed and confused. Rachel stood up, hoping to walk away before things got worse. But Emily followed, her voice dripping with anger. "Don't act like you're better than me," she shouted. The guests went silent. Rachel turned to face her, her eyes filled with hurt. "I've never said that," she whispered. "You're my sister. Why are you doing this?" For a split second, Rachel thought Emily might stop. But instead, Emily stepped closer and slapped her, hard, across the face. The sound was sharp and clear, echoing through the room. Everyone froze. Rachel's cheek burned instantly, her eyes wide with shock. No one moved. Her mother gasped. Her father stood speechless. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tight with anger. The music had stopped, and all that remained was silence and the heavy weight of shame. Rachel didn't cry. She just stood there, holding back the tears that stung her eyes. Emily seemed to realize what she had done, but pride kept her still. The room felt suffocating. Daniel stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "We're leaving." He took Rachel's hand gently and led her out without another word. As they walked toward the car, Rachel could still feel the heat on her face. The laughter, the whispers, the stares, all of it replayed in her mind. She didn't know what hurt more, the slap itself or the betrayal behind it. One moment of rage had destroyed years of sisterhood and Rachel. The night air felt cold as Daniel led Rachel to the car. Neither of them spoke. Rachel kept her eyes down, her hand trembling in his. When they reached the car, Daniel opened the door for her, his face tense and unreadable. She could see the anger in his eyes, but he was holding it back for her sake. Rachel sat silently, staring at her reflection in the window. The faint red mark on her cheek reminded her it wasn't a bad dream. It had really happened. The drive home felt endless. Daniel didn't turn on the radio. He just kept his hands tight on the wheel, his jaw locked. Rachel finally whispered, "I'm sorry." Daniel looked at her quickly, his voice calm but firm. "Don't you dare apologize. You did nothing wrong." His tone was protective but gentle. Rachel nodded and looked away, tears filling her eyes. She wasn't just hurt, she was humiliated. Her own sister had turned a family celebration into a public disgrace. When they reached home, Daniel parked the car and walked around to open her door. He didn't say anything until they got inside. Rachel sat on the couch, covering her face with her hands. Everything she'd been holding in came pouring out. She cried quietly at first, then harder, her body shaking from the pain she'd been trying to hide. Daniel sat beside her, pulling her close. He didn't try to stop her tears. He just held her until she could finally breathe again. After a long silence, he spoke softly against her hair. She's going to regret ever doing that to you. His words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that made Rachel look up. She could see how serious he was. There was no anger in his tone, just quiet determination. She wanted to tell him to let it go, but part of her couldn't. Deep down, she wanted Emily to understand what she'd done, to feel the pain and shame she had caused. Rachel wiped her eyes and whispered, "I don't want revenge. I just want peace." Daniel nodded, but his eyes told a different story. He kissed her forehead and said, "Rest. We'll talk tomorrow." Rachel leaned against him, exhausted, and closed her eyes. But even as she tried to sleep, her mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment. The sting, the gasps, the silence that followed. Daniel stayed awake long after she fell asleep. He sat there, thinking about everything he had seen. Rachel had always been kind to her sister, helping her when no one else would. And this was how Emily repaid her? His chest tightened with anger, but he kept it inside. He knew he couldn't act on emotion. He needed to be smart. Before turning off the light, he glanced at Rachel one more time. She was finally sleeping, her face still puffy from crying. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and whispered quietly, "No one humiliates my wife and gets away with it." At that moment, Daniel made a silent promise. He would make sure Emily learned the lesson she deserved. Knew nothing between them would ever be the same again. Days passed after the party, but the sting of that night didn't fade for Rachel. She avoided calls from family, too embarrassed to face anyone. Emily never apologized, not even through a message. It was as if nothing had happened. Daniel stayed calm on the outside, but Rachel could tell something was brewing inside him. He didn't talk much about it, yet there was a quiet focus in the way he moved through his days, measured, thoughtful, deliberate. Emily worked at a real estate firm that had been losing clients for months. She had mentioned it a few times before, bragging that she could turn things around if she just had the right marketing and design help. Back then, Daniel had politely offered to look over a few of their property layouts, but Emily never followed through. Now, that small connection gave him an opening. One morning, Daniel sat in his office, scrolling through his old messages, and found Emily's email. He stared at it for a long moment before replying. "Hey Emily, I've been thinking about those model homes you mentioned. I might have some new designs that could help your firm attract investors. Let's talk." His tone was friendly, professional. Nothing that would make her suspicious. When Emily saw his message, she jumped at the opportunity. Her firm was desperate, and she saw Daniel as her best chance to impress her boss. She called him immediately, sounding cheerful and eager. "Daniel, I'm so glad you reached out. We really need something fresh to bring clients back." Daniel smiled to himself as he listened. She had no idea that he wasn't doing this out of kindness. Over the next few weeks, Daniel visited her office, met her team, and reviewed their project files. He acted polite and helpful, just like always. Rachel didn't ask too many questions. She trusted Daniel completely. But she noticed how late he stayed at work and how serious he looked when she asked about his day. He would just smile and say, "Just handling a few things." Emily was thrilled to have him around. She bragged to her co-workers that she had convinced a top architect to help them for free. What she didn't know was that Daniel was quietly observing everything. The weak spots, the disorganization, and the careless mistakes Emily made trying to impress her boss. He kept detailed notes and collected emails where she exaggerated numbers and took credit for others' work. Daniel never spoke badly of her to anyone. He didn't have to. He knew that patience would do more damage than anger ever could. Rachel began to notice small hints that something was happening behind the scenes. Emily's tone changed in calls, her confidence sounded forced. But Daniel didn't explain. He simply told Rachel, "Some people only learn when life shows them who they really are." Rachel didn't press further. Deep down, she trusted him. She didn't know exactly what Daniel was planning, but she could sense that Emily's pride. A few weeks later, Emily's situation at work grew worse. Her firm was struggling to stay afloat, and her boss had started putting pressure on her to bring in new investors. She felt desperate but tried not to show it. Then Daniel reached out again, suggesting that his firm might be interested in collaborating on a new real estate project. The moment she heard those words, Emily's hope returned. She thought this was her chance to prove herself, and to show everyone, especially Rachel, that she was successful. Daniel spoke with her in a calm, professional tone. "We're considering investing in a few residential properties. I remember your firm had some promising listings. Maybe we can review them together." Emily could hardly hide her excitement. "Absolutely. I can put together a proposal by next week," she said quickly. She spent the following days working late, preparing fancy presentations and reports she barely understood. All she cared about was looking impressive. At home, Rachel noticed Daniel's quiet focus again. He didn't bring up Emily's name, but Rachel could tell he was planning something. She didn't ask questions this time. She just watched him work and trusted that whatever he was doing had a purpose. When the day of the meeting came, Emily walked into Daniel's firm with her head held high. She wore her best suit, smiled confidently, and acted like she was already sealing the deal. Daniel greeted her politely, introduced her to his team, and let her present her proposal. She talked for nearly an hour, explaining numbers, potential profits, and her firm's success strategy. The executives nodded and took notes, but Daniel remained silent, just observing her carefully. After the meeting, Daniel told her, "We'll review everything and get back to you." Emily left feeling proud and relieved. She believed she had impressed everyone. That night, she called Rachel, pretending to be friendly. "Guess who's about to close a huge deal with Daniel's company?" she said smugly. Rachel's stomach turned, but she kept her tone calm. "That's nice, Emily. I hope it works out for you." Deep down, she didn't believe Daniel would involve himself in anything that wasn't fair. Over the next week, Emily couldn't stop talking about the deal. She told her coworkers she had single-handedly saved the firm. Her boss congratulated her and hinted at a possible promotion. But what Emily didn't know was that Daniel's firm wasn't actually investing. They were only reviewing the proposal to assess her firm's transparency. It was a test, not a partnership. Daniel had quietly informed his team to check every detail Emily had submitted. If there were inconsistencies, they would be reported directly to her company's board. He didn't have to manipulate anything. He just gave her enough space to expose herself. While Emily celebrated her victory, Daniel stayed patient. He knew people like her often ruined themselves when given too much confidence. It was only a matter of time before the truth surfaced. And when it did, Emily would finally understand what regret truly felt like. Was about to be tested in a way she would never forget. It didn't take long for Emily's greed to get the best of her. When her boss asked her to finalize the paperwork for the supposed deal with Daniel's firm, she panicked. The numbers didn't add up, the costs were too high, and the returns too low. Instead of admitting it, Emily decided to tweak the figures, changing data here and there to make it look like the project was a huge success waiting to happen. She told herself no one would notice. After all, she had always managed to talk her way out of trouble before. Daniel, however, noticed everything. His team had sent him the final documents for review, and within minutes he could see the inconsistencies. The revenue projections were exaggerated, the property values inflated, and the expenses conveniently hidden. He wasn't surprised. He had seen that kind of desperation before. But this time it was personal. He didn't raise his voice or send angry messages. He simply gathered every piece of evidence, the emails, the spreadsheets, and the timelines, and put them in a clean, organized folder. The next morning, Daniel reached out to the head of Emily's firm. His tone was calm and professional. "I'm contacting you to clarify a few discrepancies in your team's proposal," he said. When the boss asked for details, Daniel sent over the documents. Within an hour, Emily's entire department was in chaos. Her boss called her into the office immediately, asking her to explain why the numbers in Daniel's copy didn't match what she had submitted internally. Emily tried to lie at first. She blamed a junior employee, claiming they must have made a mistake. But when the boss showed her the emails, the ones Daniel had saved, she went pale. Every edit, every false claim, every manipulated file had her name on it. There was no way out. By the end of the day, Emily's desk was cleared. The company's HR escorted her out while her coworkers whispered behind her back. She didn't even get a chance to explain. Everything she had built, her reputation, her pride, her career, crumbled in a single afternoon. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the termination letter in disbelief. She had no idea that Daniel had been behind the exposure. To her, it felt like the world had suddenly turned against her. Rachel didn't find out about any of it until a few weeks later. One evening, while they were having dinner, Daniel mentioned casually, "Emily got fired." Rachel froze. "How do you know that?" she asked. Daniel looked at her for a moment before saying softly, "Because I made sure her boss knew the truth." Rachel stared at him, speechless. A mix of shock and relief washed over her. She didn't know what to say. Part of her felt sorry for Emily, but another part of her knew this was the consequence of her actions. Daniel reached for her hand. She hurt you, Rachel. I didn't do this to destroy her. I did it to make her understand. Rachel looked down, her eyes filling with quiet tears. The night Emily showed up, it was raining hard. Rachel and Daniel were sitting on the couch watching TV when they heard a knock at the door. It was almost midnight, and Rachel wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she froze. Emily stood there, soaked, shivering, and with red, swollen eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Emily looked completely broken, her usual confidence gone. "Rachel, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Can I come in?" Rachel hesitated for a second before stepping aside. Emily walked in slowly, clutching her bag like it was the only thing she had left. She looked around the living room, her eyes landing on Daniel. He didn't say a word. He just stood quietly in the background. The tension was thick, but Rachel's heart softened. No matter what had happened, Emily was still her sister. They sat down at the kitchen table. Emily started talking, her words tumbling out through tears. "I lost everything, Rachel. My job fired me. I got evicted from my apartment, and Mark left me." Rachel listened in silence, her stomach tightening. Emily wiped her face with trembling hands. "I know I've been horrible to you. I said and did things I can't take back. But please, I don't have anywhere else to go." Rachel's mind raced. Part of her wanted to comfort her sister, to take her in and tell her everything would be okay. That's who she'd always been, the one who forgave, who helped, who carried others' pain even when she was hurting herself. But another part of her remembered the sting of that slap, the laughter, the humiliation, and the sleepless nights that followed. She remembered standing in a room full of people while her sister tore her dignity apart. Emily kept crying, covering her face. "I thought I could fix things at work. I thought I could make people respect me. But everything I touched just fell apart. I don't even know how it got this bad." Rachel looked at her carefully. She wanted to believe the tears were real, that Emily finally meant what she said. Daniel stood by the counter, arms crossed, watching quietly. He didn't interfere. He knew this moment wasn't his to control. It was between the two sisters. Rachel finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "You hurt me, Emily. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" Emily nodded quickly, still crying. I know. I was jealous. I didn't want to admit it, but I was. You had everything I wanted: love, respect, peace, and I ruined it." Rachel took a deep breath. "You didn't just ruin it for me, Emily. You ruined it for yourself." Her voice trembled, not from anger, but from sadness. Emily looked up, her eyes full of regret. Rachel stood and walked to the window, watching the rain hit the glass. She didn't know what to do yet. Part of her wanted to forgive, but she also knew forgiveness without change meant nothing. When she turned back, Emily was still crying quietly. Rachel finally said, "You can stay here tonight. We'll figure things out tomorrow." Emily nodded, whispering thank you through her tears. Rachel walked past Daniel, who gave her a small, understanding nod. That night, as Rachel lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, torn between pain and compassion. She knew this moment wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about finally letting go of the past, one painful piece at a time. For the first time since that awful night, she felt something close to peace. Rachel stood in front of her sister, her heart heavy. The rain kept falling outside, and the sound of it filled the silence between them. Emily looked small, broken, and lost. Rachel could have turned her away. She had every reason to. But something inside her wouldn't let her do it. She took a deep breath and said softly, "Come inside." Emily's eyes widened, surprised that Rachel didn't slam the door. She stepped in slowly, dripping water onto the floor, her shoulders shaking from both cold and shame. Rachel handed her a towel and motioned toward the couch. Emily sat down, still crying. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. Rachel sat across from her, watching her sister struggle to catch her breath. For the first time, Emily didn't try to explain or make excuses. She just looked defeated. Rachel finally spoke, her voice calm but full of emotion. "Do you remember that night at Mom and Dad's party?" Emily nodded weakly. "I remember," she whispered. Rachel's eyes glistened as she continued. "You taught me what humiliation feels like that night. You took away my dignity in front of the people I loved. I'll never forget that feeling." Emily's tears fell faster. She buried her face in her hands, whispering, "I was stupid. I was jealous, and I didn't know how to stop it." Rachel leaned forward slightly, her tone softer now. "And now maybe you understand it too. What it feels like to lose everything because of your own pride." Emily looked up, her eyes full of pain. I do, she said. I lost my job, my home, the person I loved, and I deserve it. Her voice cracked, and she started sobbing again. I just wanted to feel important, Rachel. You had everything I wanted, and I hated that. I didn't mean to destroy myself in the process. Rachel's chest tightened. For years, she had carried the hurt and betrayal, waiting for an apology that never came. Now, seeing her sister so broken, she didn't feel victorious, she felt tired. Emily, she said gently, I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted peace between us. Emily nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I know, and I ruined it. I ruined everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Rachel stood up and walked toward the window. The rain had started to slow, and the streetlights reflected off the wet pavement. You can stay here for a while, she said quietly. But this time, you'll have to rebuild your life on your own. I'll help you stand, but I can't carry your guilt for you. Emily lowered her head, ashamed but grateful. Thank you, she whispered. I don't deserve your kindness. Rachel looked at her, her face calm but unreadable. Maybe not, she said softly. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me, so I can finally move on. The two sisters sat in silence, the air between them heavy with everything left unsaid. For the first time in years, Rachel felt a strange sense of release. Emily had finally faced her own downfall, and Rachel had found the strength to forgive, not. Months passed, and life slowly found its balance again. The chaos had faded, and Rachel finally felt calm after everything that had happened. Emily had found a small job in another town and was trying to start over. She called sometimes, and though their conversations were still careful, there was peace between them. Rachel had forgiven her, not because it was easy, but because holding on to anger had become too heavy. One evening, Rachel and Daniel sat on their porch, a gentle breeze moving through the trees. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink. Rachel leaned against him quietly, sipping her tea. For the first time in a long while, her heart felt light. You didn't have to do that for me, she said softly. Her voice was calm but full of meaning. Daniel glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. No one hurts my wife and walks away proud, he said simply. Rachel looked at him for a long moment, her eyes warm. You really scared her, you know, she said, half joking. Daniel chuckled quietly. I didn't need to scare her. Life did that on its own. I just gave it a little push. His words lingered in the air, and Rachel understood exactly what he meant. Daniel hadn't acted out of cruelty. He had done it out of love. He wanted Emily to face herself, to see what her envy had cost her. Rachel took a deep breath, watching the sun sink lower in the sky. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending it never happened, she said. But now I know it's about letting go of what you can't change. Daniel nodded, resting his hand over hers. You've always had the kindest heart, Rachel. That's what makes you different. She smiled faintly. Maybe, but kindness doesn't mean weakness anymore. For the first time, Rachel felt strong in her softness. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, but she had survived with her dignity intact. She realized that revenge didn't always have to come through shouting or cruelty. Sometimes the best revenge was quiet, the kind that let life handle the justice. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, Rachel leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. The world around them was calm, the air filled with the soft sounds of crickets and the rustle of leaves. I'm glad it's over, she whispered. It is, Daniel said, squeezing her hand gently. And you came out stronger than ever. Rachel smiled, closing her eyes. She thought about how much had changed, the pain, the anger, the long nights spent crying. All of it had led her here, sitting beside the man who stood by her when everything fell apart. She didn't need her sister's apology anymore. Life had already balanced the scales. In that quiet moment, she realized something important. Sometimes you don't have to fight back for justice. Sometimes you just have to trust that the universe knows what it's doing. And as Daniel wrapped his arm around her, Rachel finally felt at peace, free from hate and stronger than she'd ever been. Because her sister deserved it, but because she deserved peace.